My husband announced his affair over the phone and sold our apartment without my permission, but when I discovered the property was only in my name, I exposed him as a fraud and left him broke. I'm 34 years old. I work in digital marketing for a tech company, and I need to tell this story because there are still days when I wake up and I can't believe it actually happened. Marcus and I were married for 7 years, and I thought I knew him. You know? I thought we were a team, that we had plans, that we were going to grow old together in that apartment we loved so much in the city center. But turns out you don't really know someone until they try to screw you over in the most spectacular way possible. I guess I should start at the beginning, or at least where everything started falling apart without me realizing it. Marcus worked in finance, always traveling, always at conferences or meetings with important clients. At first it bothered me a bit, to be honest, because he spent like 2 weeks a month away from home, but I got used to it. We had our routines. He'd call me every night when he was traveling. He'd send me pictures of the fancy hotels where he stayed, and I'd go on, with my life, with my work, with my friends. I thought that was normal in modern marriages. You know, each person with their own things, but together on what matters. The apartment was our pride and joy. A beautiful place on the 12th floor overlooking the city. 2 bedrooms, open kitchen, the kind of places you see in magazines. We bought it like 5 years ago. It was a whole odyssey getting the mortgage and all that, but it was worth it, or so I thought. What I didn't know then, and this is important, is that like 8 months ago, we refinanced the mortgage because interest rates dropped, and we could save quite a bit of money each month. Marcus handled all the paperwork because he was the one who understood finances. I just signed where he told me to sign. Turns out that in that refinancing, for some technical reason I don't even remember well, the deed ended up in my name only. I think it had to do with my credit score or something like that. I don't know. Honestly, I didn't pay too much attention to it at the time because I trusted him completely. Fast forward to 3 months ago. Marcus was on one of his business trips, this time in Miami. He had to be away for like 10 days. I was at the office. It was a normal Tuesday. I think it was around 3 in the afternoon. And he calls me. Right from the tone of voice, I knew something was off. Like he had that tense voice you put on when you're nervous but trying to sound casual. He says, "Sophia, we need to talk." And I obviously get scared because nobody says that if they're going to give you good news, right? I ask him if he's okay, if something happened, and he just says, "I can't continue with this. I want a divorce." I sat there at my desk, with the phone pressed to my ear, and honestly, I couldn't process what I was hearing. I tell him, "What? What are you talking about?" And he drops the whole bomb at once. That he met someone else, that he's been seeing her for like 6 months, that he realized he doesn't love me anymore, that he needs to move on with his life. And me there, in total shock, trying not to cry in the middle of the open office where everyone can see me, and then he says what really left me frozen. "Oh, and I sold the apartment. I'm closing the sale in 2 weeks. I already found a new place for me and Vanessa." Can you believe it? The guy is announcing the divorce over the phone from another state, and on top of that tells me he sold our apartment like it was an old piece of furniture he doesn't want anymore. I asked him how he dared to do that without consulting me, and he tells me, very calmly, that the apartment was in his name too, that he had every legal right, that I could obviously keep half the money from the sale, but that he needed to start from scratch. That Vanessa, that's his mistress's name by the way, wanted a place just for the two of them, something new, without memories of me. He said it like that, literally, without memories of you, as if our 7 years together were garbage that had to be thrown away. I hung up the phone because I felt like I was going to vomit or scream or both. My boss saw me from her office and gestured for me to come in, and I tried to compose myself, but it was useless. As soon as I closed her office door, I started crying like I hadn't cried since my grandmother died. I told her everything. She told me to go home, to take the rest of the day, to take the whole week if I needed it. But I didn't want to go to the apartment. I couldn't be there alone, knowing that Marcus had sold it without telling me anything. So I called my best friend Rachel and went straight to her house. Rachel received me with whine and rage, like she was more furious than me at that moment. We spent like 2 hours with me venting, me crying and telling her everything, and her saying that Marcus was a son of a bitch, how dare he, that this couldn't be legal. And that's when the light bulb went off. I literally sat up straight on the couch and said, "Wait, is this legal? Can he sell the apartment without my consent?" And Rachel, who's a corporate lawyer but has friends in all areas, tells me that definitely not, that if the apartment is in both our names, he needs my signature to sell it, that this sounds super illegal. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I stayed at Rachel's house on her sofa bed, and the first thing I did the next morning was look for all the apartment papers I had saved in my email. And there it was, the deed from the refinancing 8 months ago. And when I opened it and read the details carefully, I almost had a heart attack, but like the good kind. The apartment was in my name, only mine, because of the refinancing. Marcus didn't appear anywhere as owner, only as spouse. But legally, the apartment was completely mine. I couldn't believe it. I read the document 5 times to be sure. I sent a screenshot to Rachel and she confirmed it, told me to call a lawyer immediately, that this was fraud, that Marcus was trying to sell a property that wasn't his. She gave me the contact for Elena, a lawyer specialized in family law and fraud cases who had gone to college with her. I called her that same day. It was Friday morning, and Elena told me to come to her office immediately. Elena is one of those people who makes you feel like everything's going to be okay as soon as you meet them, you know? She's 40 years old. Super professional but also warm, and when I told her the whole story and showed her the documents, she leaned back in her chair and smiled in a way that gave me hope for the first time in 2 days. She told me that Marcus was in serious legal trouble, that trying to sell a property that doesn't belong to you is fraud, and that the buyer wasn't going to be able to close the sale because I hadn't signed anything, and that we could also proceed against Marcus for attempted fraud. I asked her what we should do, and she already had a plan. First, she was going to contact the buyer, or their lawyer, to notify them that the sale was invalid, that the apartment didn't belong to Marcus, and that any contract he had signed had no legal value. Second, she was going to send Marcus a formal letter notifying him that we were aware of his fraud attempt and that if he didn't cancel the sale immediately, we were going to proceed legally. And third, she was going to start the divorce papers, but this time the conditions were going to be dictated by me, not him. I'm not going to lie. I felt powerful for the first time since Marcus called me, like I had gone from being devastated and feeling like a victim to being furious and ready to fight. Elena told me to go home, to change the locks that same day, that Marcus had no right to be there without my permission, and to wait for him to come back from Miami to confront him with everything. I went back to the apartment that Friday afternoon, called a locksmith who came in less than 2 hours and changed all the locks, while he was working. I walked around the apartment looking at all of Marcus's things, his books, his clothes, his stupid golf trophies, and I felt this weird mix of sadness and satisfaction. Sadness because our marriage had ended in the most horrible way possible, and satisfaction because he thought he had left me with nothing when in reality he had screwed himself. Marcus came back from Miami on Sunday night. He tried to open the door with his key and obviously couldn't. He rang the doorbell 5 times. I watched him through the peephole and didn't open immediately. I left him standing there for 10 minutes more because I felt like it. When I finally opened, he had that face of confusion and annoyance, and he says to me, "Why did you change the locks?" And I, very calmly, tell him, "Because this is my apartment, and you don't live here anymore." He turned red, literally, and started yelling that it was his home too, that he had a right to be there, that I couldn't just kick him out. I showed him the deed and told him, "The apartment is in my name, only mine, thanks to the refinancing that you managed months ago. You tried to sell my property without my consent? That's called fraud. And my lawyer already notified the buyer that the sale is invalid." The face he made was one of the best things I've seen in my life. He went from red to white in 2 seconds and stuttered something about how that couldn't be true, that his lawyer had told him everything was in order. I told him that his lawyer was incompetent, or that Marcus had lied to him about being the owner. I don't know. I don't care. But that the reality is that he couldn't sell what wasn't his. He asked me what was going to happen with the buyer, with the money he had already received as a down payment. And I told him that was his problem, not mine. That he would have to return the money and probably face a lawsuit. He stood there in the hallway, with his travel suitcase, not knowing what to do, and I closed the door in his face and put the deadbolt on. I thought that would be the end. But no. Marcus came back 2 days later, this time with Vanessa. They rang the doorbell in the afternoon, 6 or 7. I was making dinner, and when I opened, I found both of them standing there. Vanessa was younger than me, 27 maybe, blonde, pretty, with that innocent face that made me nauseous. Marcus tells me, "We're here to pick up my things. And Vanessa looks at me with this nervous smile like, sorry about the situation, but also, this is what it is. I told them they could come in, that Marcus had an hour to pack his most important things, and that I was going to send the rest to a storage unit that he would pay for. While Marcus was in the bedroom packing, Vanessa stayed in the living room looking at the apartment, and I couldn't contain myself. I told her, "Do you know that Marcus tried to sell you an apartment that wasn't his?" She looked at me confused, and I explained the whole situation. That the apartment was in my name, that Marcus had tried to sell it illegally, that the buyer already knew the sale was fraud. Vanessa's face changed completely. She went from that nervous little smile to being pale and in shock. I asked her, "How much did he tell you this place was worth? Did he promise you that you were going to live here together?" And she nodded. Tells me that Marcus had told her he had sold the apartment to buy another bigger one, that they had plans, that they were going to start a new life. I showed her the documents, literally took out the deed and put it in her hands, and told her that Marcus was a liar and a fraud, that if he had lied to her about this, he had probably lied to her about everything else. Vanessa started crying, asked me if it was true, if Marcus really didn't own the apartment, and I confirmed everything. I told her that the buyer was probably going to sue Marcus, that he was in serious legal trouble, and that if she was smart, she should run away from this situation as fast as possible. Marcus came out of the bedroom at that moment with 2 suitcases, saw Vanessa crying and saw me with the deed in my hand, and knew exactly what had happened. He yelled at Vanessa not to believe me, that I was lying, that everything was fine. But she yelled back at him that he was a liar. How could he deceive her like that? That she had left her previous boyfriend for him, thinking Marcus was a successful and honest man. I just stood there watching the drama unfold. And I'm not going to lie, it was satisfying in a probably unhealthy way. Vanessa told Marcus he could go to hell, that she didn't want to know anything more about him, and left the apartment slamming the door so hard it made the walls shake. Marcus stood there with his 2 suitcases, looking at me with this mix of hatred and desperation, and asked me what I wanted, what he had to do to fix this. I told him the only thing I wanted was for him to sign the divorce papers without fighting, to take his things before the end of the day, and to never try to contact me again unless it was through lawyers. I gave him until 8 at night to take out the rest of his things, and told him that if he didn't finish on time, I was going to throw what was left in the trash, and that wasn't a joke. He left and came back with a friend like an hour later, the 2 of them packing all his stuff in boxes and trash bags. I stayed in the living room watching TV like nothing, having a glass of wine that Rachel had left me. At 5 to 8 they finished. Marcus left the old keys on the kitchen table and left without saying anything else. I haven't seen him in person since that day, like 2.5 months ago now. The divorce papers are almost finalized. Marcus signed them without fighting because Elena made it very clear to him that if he tried to complicate things, we were going to proceed with fraud charges, and he didn't want that. The apartment buyer did sue him for the down payment he gave him, like $50,000, I think. And as far as I know, Marcus had to take out a loan to return the money. Vanessa blocked him everywhere and went to live with a friend. Rachel told me she saw her at a cafe a few weeks ago and she looked much better, like more relaxed and happy. And me? Well, here I am. I redecorated the whole apartment, painted the walls, colors that Marcus hated, but I love, changed the furniture, bought new plants, basically made the place completely mine. I don't feel sad anymore when I come in. I don't see ghosts of our past life in every corner. It's my space now, nobody else's, and it feels liberating in a way I can't explain well. Last week, Rachel came to visit me with other friends. We opened a bottle of cheap but good champagne and toasted to new beginnings and to idiots who eliminate themselves from your life. I guess if Marcus hadn't tried to screw me over in such a spectacular way, maybe I would have fallen into the trap of feeling guilty or trying to save something that no longer had salvation. But his arrogance and his stupidity gave me exactly what I needed: clarity, strength, and a beautiful apartment that's completely mine. Not bad for someone who 3 months ago thought she had lost everything, right?